Good day to you. This is Easter Sunday of 2025 from Chico, California. This is Anna Galactic bringing you the secrets of the universe. It's April 20th, Easter Sunday. It requires astronomical calculations to figure out Easter each year because it takes astronomical calculations to figure out the Passover. We won't go into that. This is not particularly a religious statement. We're well beyond religion here. We're studying the universe wherefrom originates religion. So we're far ahead of religion. And that's proved by Easter. You can't have a religion unless you have rational logic based on astronomy. So without going into that to prove or disprove it, what we have over here is the preface to a rather standard textbook, which will just go back over here to the start. Introduction to Quantum Mechanics. Oh my God! Now, if you're a rational person who is acquainted to any level of depth to quantum mechanics, you probably hate it, and you're very likely to fear it. These are the appropriate responses. You should hate and fear quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics, as we'll find out from reading from the preface of this book, is one of the most notoriously evil systems ever invented by the poisoned mind of man. It destroyed science, although the destruction of science began with Einstein. Now, here in the preface, we're going to be reading just a bit, and I want to enlarge this, so if you wish you can follow along, although if you're viewing this on a cell phone you might not be able to. I'm only doing this to give you the option. Now, it's going to expand this a little, recenter this. This is OBS, Open Broadcasting Studio, which I've used virtually exclusively since beginning these lectures 3 years ago. So here is our text, and I'm just going to read through this. What this man says is quite cogent, but it's very daunting. It's the man himself who wrote this, I would not say is anti-scientific, although that's quite typical of professors these days. Instead of being anti-scientific, he's a lick spittle. That I don't mean that pejoratively, although the term is pejorative usually. But sometimes people are forced to be lick spittles, sycophants. This is a professor, so he's extremely well paid. Now, they themselves would just absolutely deny that for reasons I think you're fully aware of. Oh, no, we're underpaid. No, they're not. Not by any standard except their own are they underpaid. So there's very, very strong motivation for carrying on this horror that is called quantum mechanics. My goal in explaining this to you is essentially twofold. It's so that you'll have a complete and total picture of quantum mechanics so that you understand it, even though the professor admits that he doesn't understand it. Nobody can understand it. And in fact, he quotes Richard Feynman, a very famous quote, that it's safe to say that nobody understands quantum mechanics. That is anti-scientific. Science has a specific goal. Now, without getting into the philosophy here, I want to give you my other reason for going through the basics of quantum mechanics as it is taught at the university and technical level. It's quite evil, it's quite daunting, it's anti-scientific crap. But in order to credit even what I'm saying about it, which is quite subjective, you'd have to say, I have quite a powerful subjective opinion of quantum mechanics. But if that's all I had to offer you, this would be a worthless series, a worthless lecture, a worthless presentation, a worthless frame of mind. That is not my primary goal in going through the technical difficulties of quantum mechanics, how it developed, what it is today, what it actually means. The author of this book, and it is a university level textbook, he admits that it cannot be understood, but he understands which side of the bread goes the butter in America. When I say America, I always include Europe. It's really the white people, but we don't want to get into that either. It's the group of people on Earth who developed science to its present level of insanity. It's not a terrifying story, that is, science itself. Science is magnificent. So my second goal in presenting to you the rudiments of quantum mechanics as seen from the classroom, really from the physicist's point of view, is so you'll be able to hear my comments, which are going to be decisive. Quantum mechanics is so baffling and so overpoweringly wrong that it turns off the mind. So that's why I say it's evil. And I have to have some kind of logical basis for saying that. I will be exposing just what makes quantum mechanics so horrifying, and why it's anti-scientific, and why it's destroyed science. Now this would be compartmentalized, contextualized. Science is never going to stop, and it's always going to be good, but it's hard to see where it's going, and it's hard to see why it's good. So the main reason I'm producing this, at long last, really after 3 years going through the rudiments, is to expose the answer. What actually is quantum mechanics? To absolutely bitch slap Richard Feynman, who really discredited himself with such a hugely self-incriminatory statement that it's safe to say that nobody understands quantum mechanics. Why would that be wrong if everybody agrees on that? With a possible exception of Bohr. It's because I got the answer. So Feynman's wrong. Somebody can understand it. Currently, I happen to know for an absolute fact that I am the only person in science who understands quantum mechanics and can explain it, to make it understandable so it makes sense. So that's a major breakthrough in science. And that's, for me, the end of the line, seen objectively. If I have the answer, I cannot ever be credited. I will be labeled a kook and a disruptor, really a heretic, because there are trillions of dollars invested in this madness. The reason is sordid. It goes to the human equation, really the nature of Satan. So we're not going there either, although I've covered this in my 930 lectures thus far. Not all of them are published. For the past 20 days I've been without internet connection. So this will be uploaded perhaps within this week, because I've ordered new equipment for a broadband connection, so I'll be able to resume publishing. So this is a delayed release video. So to get going, just quickly to recap, we're going to absolutely understand quantum mechanics the way it's presented now, and nobody can do that. This man certainly cannot. And nobody can. Richard Feynman is correct to that extent. The way the axiomatic basis of quantum mechanics was developed was incorrect from the beginning. That is virtually known, but that information is suppressed. Because if you're on a locomotive that's on its way perhaps at 60 miles an hour to a very important destination that is time dependent, and somebody pulls the cord to stop the train, the engineer might not stop. In this case, the engineer cannot stop. So I'm nothing but a nuisance. Nothing but a nuisance. But that brings up the second vector that I'm pursuing, which is outside the bounds of currently recognized science. What I'm going to be doing is showing you how I solved the equations, how I got the answers, how I solved the quantum paradox, and in process discovered virtually all the secrets that are currently unknown at the cutting edge of physics. So that's a lot. And I know I probably present myself preposterously, pompously, pretentiously, and precociously. That's too bad. All of those reactions are right out in science. The same reaction was extended towards Copernicus, Galileo, even Einstein. Anybody who came up with something new that revolutionized science at first was resisted with might and main. Very rarely has anyone come up with some breakthrough discovery in science, in any department, that was not instantly rejected. There are reasons for that, which even go down to the basis of how science must be conducted to do what it does. The basic reason being we're fallible, extremely fallible, extraordinarily fallible, extremely tiny, limited cellular organisms. But we do have a mind which matches the universe. That's miraculous and proves the existence of a designer. Otherwise, there would be no science at all. And if you're worried about the so-called new atheism, which I've inveighed against, even to my peril, that should be good news indeed if you credit it. It's true, so you can credit it because I said it. So there's some pretension for you. Unlike Newton's mechanics, or Maxwell's electrodynamics, or even Einstein's relativity, quantum theory was not created or even definitely packaged by one individual. And it retains to this day some of the scars of its exhilarating but traumatic youth. That's back in the 1920s, essentially. There is no general consensus as to what its fundamental principles are. I want to stop right there. That's the end of the book. That is where you should stop reading if you're rational. What he's saying is, first let's repeat that. There is no general consensus as to what its fundamental principles are. Really? Well, then it's not science. Science is consensual. He's not talking about mavericks who are always at the fringe trying to push the boundaries. He's talking about basic understanding. So let's complete that sentence. There is no general consensus. That's a dangerous way to... I think you understand a general consensus covers a whole spectrum. So this is not a very precise statement. It's really his subjective view. There's no general consensus as to what its fundamental principles are, how it should be taught, or what it really means, with a little two quotations. In other words, the very concept of meaning is absent. There is no meaning. It can't be taught, and nobody knows what its general principles, fundamental principles are. Every competent physicist can do quantum mechanics, in other words, a machine process, without using your brain at all. I'm getting to a very important point by the end of this first paragraph, which will encapsulate all of this, I would have to say, daunting and put-offish, really fully rejectable nonsense. What he's saying is that quantum mechanics is nonsensical. Feynman agrees, and all physicists, either indeed, if not in word, indeed, if not in word, have to accept that because it's absolutely true. So why are these scientists doing this? It's because they have no choice. And it's not just because of money. and the horrifying position of a human being in this world trying to survive. Quantum mechanics offers a way to survive for an American if you're in the 99th percentile in mathematical ability. That's absolutely required. If you're 99 out of 100 scientists, you can't do quantum. You never will do it. You could study all your life and you'll never be able to do it because you weren't born with the right mathematical aptitude. And that's a huge red flag because science is for everybody. Science is for everybody at all ages, regardless of aptitude. It's to give answers to humans by consulting the universe. So essentially what this professor is saying is, you're not going to get anything out of this. It's not going to help you. Well, then why is his classroom packed, as all the classrooms on quantum mechanics are, throughout the university system, extending into Europe and now worldwide? Why study it? Because it gives you a chance to survive. So there is definitely a second motive, which is totally anti-scientific. Once money is involved, the game is over. You're not going to get what you want out of science if the person you're listening to is motivated by money. All right, just as in politics and just as in religion, following the money trail will solve a lot of the irrational aspects of common life. See where the money goes and you'll see where Satan lives, because Satan controls money, not humans. And if you don't know what Satan is, God, I pity you. All right, but you can always listen to my prior videos, and then you'll be educated and you'll have understanding and you'll be able to cope rationally with any situation. I teach how to think. I teach rational logic. Every competent physicist can do quantum mechanics, but the stories we tell ourselves about what we are doing are as various as the tales of Scheherazade, and almost as implausible. None of this is good. Richard Feynman says, I think nobody understands it. The purpose of this book is to teach you how to do quantum mechanics. I'm going to skip to the third paragraph. Not only is quantum theory conceptually rich, that is absolutely confoundingly confusing with no hope of resolution. That's what he's saying. Conceptually rich, he's biased. He does teach how to do quantum mechanics. What he's trying to say is, as honestly as he can, this is not science. It isn't science. And I'm going to show you why it's not science. The only way a man could do that, and I believe I'm the only man who can do this, the only way you can show why quantum mechanics is not even science, it's really antithetical to science, is that there are two sides. This is superpositional. In fact, what we're going to be talking about is the very nature of superposition in science, because that is what was discovered at a certain level, is the universe's idea of logic. It does not match human logic, because human logic is linear. It's okay, I hope that doesn't baffle you. But in introducing this topic of quantum mechanics, whatever it is necessary to touch the owie. You have to see clearly why it's bullshit. And it's very, very difficult to pin down why it's bullshit. I'll show you why it's bullshit. But the only rational approach, so that this won't be just a rant against anti-science, which accomplishes nothing except perhaps raises the level of awareness. But science isn't about doing that. It's about getting solutions. So it's critical that you know that I do have the solution, the exact solution, to everything in quantum mechanics. I can solve the Schrödinger wave equation. I can solve the Pauli matrices. I know everything there is to know about quantum mechanics that makes it science. No one else does. That's what this man is saying. So it's technically difficult, and exact solutions to all but the most artificial textbook examples are few and far between. You may happen to know that the situation he's describing, where a mathematical framework must be used because it's standard science now, right or wrong, is that the exact solutions are few and far between. I'm quoting him. What does he mean by that? It means that it's not exact, and that's a huge red flag. Quantum mechanics cannot get exact solutions. You can set up some artificial situations where you can pretend to get an exact solution. And these, of course, would be the examples taught in a classroom because they're easiest, because it's the least amount of technical difficulty. Now, you may know, or I'll bet you can credit my next statement, that quantum mechanics is just very going, whichever way, going higher and higher in the complexification of the tool set that mathematics is forced to use now due to its own mistakes. That the situation in a classroom for teaching mathematics has several corollary or parallel situations where it's very difficult to teach a tool. Quantum mechanics is nothing but tools, but with no solutions. That's also true of the sine-cosine parameterization of the circle. When teaching the sine-cosine parameterization, which is universal in science, it's very difficult to teach because it doesn't make sense. And every student knows that and is forced to suppress it. That's the worst possible situation. The situation is repeated with the complex numbers, which are impossible to understand. And everybody knows it, but you have to use it because it's said that it works. But the examples given for why complex numbers work are few and far between. Usually it's a grind. You simply must have a calculator, if not a supercomputer, to do sine-cosine parameterization. It's not something you can do on paper, certainly not quickly. And the third example, besides the complex numbers and the sine-cosine system, is of course calculus. One of the biggest mistakes ever made in science is Newton's invention of the calculus. And I'll attribute it to Newton and not Leibniz. They should have equal credit. But since the discovery of the calculus is a mistake, to give credit to the discoverer who should get the most credit would be a blight on that scientist's name. So I give it to Newton. He deserves it. Since he inveighed against Leibniz, or his followers inveighed against Leibniz and his followers, totally tragic, totally horrifying. One of the biggest blights on science at several levels that's ever occurred in the history of science. So you could say that the mistakes that led to quantum mechanics began about the time of Newton. That's a fair statement. We'll leave it at that. So he goes on, it is therefore essential to develop special techniques. There's more complication for attacking more realistic problems. In other words, the closer you get to reality, the less you're going to be able to do these equations because it doesn't match reality. Accordingly, okay, it's important, whatever. Now, here's some important stuff, and I'm going to have to recenter this, I believe. Yes, I see I am. See if that helps. I hope that helps. There we go. All right. This book is intended, okay, whatever. A full year course. Now, what he's describing here is for the students who have a tragic road ahead. It's going to cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars of their family's money to get through this obstacle course so that hopefully you survive, get a degree, and then you can enter the industry and survive. So this is a survival course. It really doesn't have anything to do with science except in the worst possible way. So he says all the stuff you're going to need. You are going to need the rudiments of linear algebra. I will teach you that. The complex numbers, I will teach you that. And calculus, I'm the only man who can teach that. Up through partial derivatives, a absolute nightmare. Some acquaintance with Fourier analysis, which I will explain to you. Bohm says that too, David Bohm. You really have to know Fourier analysis, and I'll show you why. And the Dirac delta function, these are all nightmarish topics, but you see there's a list. So this is entry into just a horrifying prison of nightmares. Elementary classic mechanics is essential. That's about an 8-year course. And a little electrodynamics would be useful in places. That's a tremendous condescension. And I won't even comment on that ridiculous statement. This is a professor. He's trying to survive. He needs to maintain his position in order to put bread and butter on the table for himself and his family if he has one. As always, the more physics and math you know, the easier it will be, and the more you will get out of your study to survive, not to understand anything in the universe, but just to make a living. But I would like to emphasize that quantum mechanics is not, in my view, something that flows smoothly and naturally from earlier theories. That's the understatement of the year. On the contrary, it represents an abrupt and revolutionary departure. Abrupt means we've reached a quantization point that we were not able to achieve, and that's virtually a metaphor. And to say that it's revolutionary means all of your prior training is meaningless now. So he's saying you have to know all these things, and it's endless. You'll be studying for the rest of your life to no avail. What you need is a complete change of mind. Nobody teaches that at all. All right. And then he says that's what makes this fascinating. It's the carrot, but it's really the stick that drives these poor bastards. At first glance, this book may strike you as forbiddingly mathematical. This is Bohm's book, which I acquired, Quantum Theory. It's over 600 pages long. I'm just going to turn to a random page to demonstrate that Bohm faces the same situation. This is one of the most excellent expositors of quantum mechanics, if not the greatest, until myself. And what he says in his preface is that he's going to do his utmost to present quantum mechanics without mathematics. Here's a random page. I just opened this book at random. I want you to get a look at the magnificent success that Bohm had in avoiding mathematics. That's every page of 600 pages, loaded with integrals and gobbledygook, none of which is explained because it can't be explained. I'm sorry, but that's not science. So, it's forbiddingly, very forbidding. We encounter Legendre, Hermite, Laguerre, spherical harmonics, Bessel, Neumann and Hankel functions, airy functions, even the Riemann zeta function. Not to mention Fourier transforms, Hilbert spaces, Hermitian operators, Clebsch-Gordon coefficients, and Lagrange multipliers. Is all this baggage really necessary? Listen to his answer. Perhaps not. All right. I'm not going to go on. You can get this book for free online, and I'll have links for that once I've uploaded this, which is not going to be possible, but it may be possible within the next few days because my equipment for my broadband connection will arrive by then. All right, that's a half an hour. I'm going to put this on pause and prepare the next half hour so we get the solutions that no one else can provide. Only I can teach you quantum mechanics now. I have the answers. I can explain everything. No matter how far-fetched it may seem, how daunting, how forbidding, I will explain to you for the first time in my presentation series why all of this crap baggage is used. But the most important part is the solution. So stay tuned and keep looking up. We'll be right back.